Girls Island. Yeah, you got to down.
Meetings, yeah. All that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff.
It's happening. That's a big one.
We've got to run.
If you want to keep it learning. Yeah. Does he?
Right, 2 o'clock. Okay, good. Welcome to this meeting. And told it'll be you'll be here for 2 hours unless you don't want to be. That's packed full of exciting stuff. So I'd like to call this meeting for the Development of Transportation and Infrastructure Advisory Committee for April 10th to order. And I'd be welcoming or inviting adoption of agenda recommendations there. Rob, seconded by Brian, all in favor, carried. Adoption of minutes for February 20th, 2025. Entertain a motion. Paul, seconded by, Lucas, all in favor, carried. Thank you. So we have no presentations, no delegations, and we're down to the reports. I'm going to call on Mark Neal to introduce the first one.
Great, thank you, Chair. This morning we had the exact same agenda for BIPAC, or other advisory committee. They asked lots of questions and took the full 2 hours. We'll see how we do this afternoon. Maybe we'll be here longer or shorter, I don't know. The first item is the development application process review update. The city has initiated or now completed a review of our development application process. This was done with the mindset of looking for opportunities to be more efficient and effective in how we review development applications. We elected to engage an external consultant to have an outsider view of this. We hired Alan Nielsen. Mr. Nielsen has extensive experience in this type of work with the city. He did our building permit review process as well as other municipalities. So he's bringing that outsider's perspective and that expertise and best practices from other municipalities. He's completed his review and has now shared with us his findings and recommendations. So today is about Mr. Nielsen sharing that work with you. And then we'll certainly take questions of the committee for Mr. Nielsen or for staff, and we'll talk about what's next steps with this project. So with that, I'll turn over to Alan.
Welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Neal. I am happy to be here to discuss this report. I've been before this committee before with my colleague Sherry Hurst, who's actually online with us today. She was unable to be here in person, but she's here and happy to participate in the discussion when we get to questions as well. Yes, as the committee may recall, about probably close to a year ago, actually at the beginning of the process, when I met with this committee, or Sherry and I met with this committee and outlined what it is we were going to be tackling over the course of the project, get some feedback from and input from this committee, which we're happy to be back to talk about our findings. Presentation, Mr. Chair, consists of a few points. We'll start very briefly, and as Mr. Neal mentioned, I appreciate you're on a tight timeline today, so we'll move through as quickly as possible, particularly some of these early bits. We'll talk about the purpose, the scope, and the review. A little bit about the approach we took, the current system, not too much to talk about there, but I'll just highlight a few points. Really the opportunities for change and the recommendations of the city. Those are the parts that we'll spend most time on in my presentation and probably the questions that come from the committee. When we think about the purpose and scope, well, really it's looking at opportunities to strengthen the development approval process. So when we think about the process, it includes not just the processes themselves, not just the steps that are taken, but also the broader development function that is in place to administer the processes, to work applications through the processes. So how we're staffed, how we are structured, the types of tools we have at our disposal, all of those kinds of things we wanted to look at and identify how we can make those things stronger. It does reflect the commitment, the study that is reflects the commitment the city has taken and has demonstrated in a lot of its business processes to customer service, to continuous improvement. And as everybody here around the table will know, given your backgrounds, we're working in a context of growth. And we've had a lot of growth in the last few years. We've got affordability pressures, which are ongoing, and we anticipate future growth as well at a rapid pace and at a real clip there too, in a substantial amount. Legislative change, as everybody here will know, has occurred, has colored the environment in which we're working. And so that has been another part of the context around this initiative. We set out a number of objectives that we wanted to consider as we went through this work and really to help guide our work and to guide in particular the recommendations. The first is speed. So we always want to be mindful of speed and to move applications through the system as quickly as we can. Efficiency, how are we using our resources to achieve speed, but also to achieve effectiveness, efficacy, if you will. So the efficiency with which we're using our resources. Measurement or measuring the data we collect and the data we can report in terms of timelines that we're meeting, in terms of targets we're meeting, how are we, other performance indicators, what's available to the city and how can we communicate that data or those data. Customer experience, the city is very clear that every time we interact with individuals who rely on our services or participate in our processes, we want to ensure that there is a good experience at the end of that for the customer through that process. So that's another objective we had to optimize that customer experience. Transparency, always striving to be transparent so people who are going through our processes understand where they are in the process, what types of materials they need to provide, when they can expect responses from us. Those kinds of, and also just in terms of the decision making and the basis of decisions that we put forward. Are we transparent in that decision? Is it arbitrary or is it transparent? And then clarity and predictability, a little bit related to transparency in the sense of everybody understanding both within the city and then within the development industry among applicants as well, understanding roles and responsibilities in the process. And then the predictability, not just focusing on speed, but also focusing on predictability, assurance and certainty. Building that environment of certainty so people who are coming through the system and getting approvals from us have a sense of certainty and can arrange for their professionals, can arrange for their financing, knowing that certain dates are going to be met. The scope really focused on typical development applications. And so we looked at OCP, of course, we looked at rezonings being a key one, development permits, development variance permits, subdivision. Those were really kind of the top 5 that we focused on and looked at how they work through the system now and what the strengths are of that review system and maybe what are some areas to improve. And as I noted earlier, we looked not only at the processes themselves, but at the broader function. And we looked in particular at 2 departments of the city. The first, planning and development services, and in particular in that department, development planning. And then also within engineering and regional utilities, we wanted to focus on development engineering because of the role it plays in reviewing development applications. We had an 8-stage work program that we followed. Basically, or in some, it involved a lot of interviews. We talked to all staff involved in the process. We reviewed best practices. We had consultation with a number of development and industry professionals. And we had consultation with 2 city committees. This committee, and as Mark mentioned earlier, a committee this morning, the Business Improvement Committee. Current system. Folks will understand the current system. We put this in the document. We'd like to outline the current system for a couple of reasons. One is because we want to make it very clear to all readers, some of whom will come at the subject matter with less expertise than others and less experience than others. We want to help decision makers and other people involved in the processes to understand very clearly the purpose of the function, for example, the legislative framework within which we work, all those kinds of things. We want to outline that for that purpose. We also want to look at the current system because before we can suggest changes to improve the system or to address opportunities in the system, we want to make sure we're very clear on what is in place right now. We can't understand what we should be changing or recommending to change if we don't understand what we have in place. So there's in the report, which will be coming out in the near future, that report will have a big section on the current framework, talking about staffing levels, approval processes that are followed, technologies that's used in the city, information to applicants, the materials that are sent out to guide applicants through the process, and then of course our statistics, really to emphasize the growth that has occurred, the activity that has occurred, and what we anticipate going forward. Now, the main part then, as I mentioned earlier in my opening comments, is to focus on these opportunities and the recommendations. I'll start with planning and development services. Each of these opportunity areas is addressed in a set of recommendations. So I'll move through the list of them very quickly, and then we'll focus a little bit more as we get to the recommendations because those correspond to these themes. The first relates to development inquiry meetings. As the group will know, when applications come forward, applicants have, or when an applicant or prospective applicant is interested in coming to work with the city, there is an opportunity to schedule a development inquiry meeting. Important to allow for that connection, to find out the city's aims, to kind of understand the requirements the city has. We feel that there may be some better ways to do development inquiry meetings, to look at restructuring those to put development inquiry meetings in one category and then look at pre-application meetings in a separate category. So when we get to the recommendations, I'll expand on that. File management, what we're dealing with file management essentially is everything from the submission of the file to the assignment of the file to a file manager, and the process, the steps that are involved in that process and how we can streamline that a little bit. Application tracking, this is something that's important not only for staff to ensure that everything is understood with respect to where every application is in the system, but also for, and perhaps even more so for applicants, for people who go through the system, so that we can be very transparent and accountable on how applications are moving through and what rate they're moving through and where they are in the system, and also what is required at different steps in the system. Target timelines, we do want to set target timelines because it does allow for that certainty. It does enhance that predictability and that transparency as well. We want to be careful in how we set those. We want them to be based on data. We want them to be ambitious, but not so ambitious that they're unachievable. We can work towards improving them over time, but we want them to be realistic as we start on that as well. And we want different target timelines, perhaps for different types of development applications. Simple applications, complex applications, different streams of applications, those types of things. Development application review team. I think the group here understands that there is a development application review team, which is an interdepartmental forum that brings together representatives from all of the departments that touch the applications as they go through the system, that review the applications and provide feedback to the file manager. Abbotsford has used, and it's really a best practice, this interdepartmental team to come together to exchange information, to discuss applications as they are before the city, so that we can look at compromises, we can look at requirements and ways to move them through quickly. Much more efficient than relying on individuals from different departments to meet offline with one another and separately and so forth. So bring everybody together. Our concerns, I guess, or our thoughts with respect to the development applications review team is that there is a better way to, or more efficient way perhaps, to manage that, to use that forum, to use that tool. What we send to the development application review team is important. then less is more in this case. We want to have it focus on the more complex cases. And also the people around the table are important. We want to ensure that people around the table have the authority they need to make decisions on trade-offs, to kind of make decisions on how to move the applications through quickly. I talked earlier about target timelines, and I mentioned that we would be looking at target timelines for different streams of applications. And this comes then back to the streaming application idea. The notion that right now, like in several municipalities, there is a first in, first out approach to the review of applications. So irrespective of the type of application, when it comes into the queue, it's looked at in order received. There's some merits to that in the sense that every application is treated as a valuable application to the city. The reality however, is that not every application is of equal value to the city or to the community. So we want to look at ways to separate different types of applications into streams so that we can give focused attention to particular types of applications and not gum up the system by having a very simple application behind a complex application, for example, or treating one or applying resources to address one type of application that may really accord with a certain priority of council, whether that be non-market housing or a certain type of housing in a certain type or development in a certain type of area, those kinds of things. So look at different streams and depart from the first in, first out model. Review letters. So as the group here will know, every time we look at reviewing a development application, we get all of our feedback from our review agencies or review departments, I should say, our referral departments in-house, the city and from others. And we put together through the planning manager a comprehensive review letter. We always want to ensure that the review letters are comprehensive, not overly cumbersome, but comprehensive, but also that they are once and done. We can then give the assurance to the applicant that the review letter you're going to receive is one that captures all of the requirements you need to address. And we're not going to be coming back with future iterations with additional requirements. Delegation of authority, I believe folks here will understand that the legislation around delegation of authority in 2021, 2022 was expanded to allow, to give councils the right to, or the power to delegate approval authority for minor development variance permits to staff. We're recommending that. We're recommending, in essence, the city to take the approach that wherever we can delegate authority from council to staff, where appropriate, let's do that. Obviously, some things will always stay with council, both legally and perhaps from a policy perspective, but the more we can expand that delegation of authority, the more opportunity we have to move things through quickly. Authority of file managers, we want to ensure that the file manager, the individual, the planner who has been assigned responsibility for the particular file for the application, has the authority to be the sole point person on the file, to bring together the information and the feedback from the different referral departments and communicate that on behalf of the city to the applicant. We want to ensure that also the file managers have the authority they need to make judgment calls and the tools that they have that they need in order to have the confidence to make those judgment calls as well. Templates and professional reliance. The more assistance we can give professionals, the consulting professionals in different, whether all the whole range of consulting professionals that need to submit as part of applications technical reports, the more guidance we can give to those professionals to ensure that the reports coming forward are in a format and contain the information we need the city needs in order to make decisions quickly, the better. Professional reliance as well. If there are cases where we need to do a peer review, we need to be very clear on when that's going to occur. And we need to set that out in a bylaw as well. Technology, we do have what's in place right now called the Amanda platform. It's buttressed by some other software as well, but we want to be able to harness that technology, as is happening in some other places. Municipalities have been challenged, I think, with being able to really harness application review software programs to their full potential, but we are seeing some movements in other places. We want to emulate some of those to really apply technology. So we have developed application portals and we have lots of other features that can allow us to get good applications into the system, keep incomplete applications out of the system, and allow for tracking through the system. And finally, internal support. This point relates back to the authority of file managers a little bit. We want to ensure that our staff who are involved in the review of development applications have the tools they need to make judgment calls, have the tools they need to review all of the things and bring together the materials that they need and the reviews that they need to quickly interact with the applicant and to do so over the course of the review. So some internal ideas in there around internal support to give staff both the tools and the confidence they need to be able to do their job as effectively as possible. Mr. Chair, I'll just move through also then a few opportunities under development engineering, and then I'll move quickly to the recommendations which correspond to these opportunities. When we think of development engineering, well, when we think, first of all, of engineering as a broader department, we have a lot of different divisions within engineering. We have transportation, utilities, operations, and we have development engineering. In development engineering, or development engineering, as the group here will appreciate, is the division in engineering that is responsible for speaking on behalf of the department with respect to development applications. So it reviews the development applications, it provides comments to the file manager, and outlines all of the standards and requirements for works and services, and then puts that back to the file manager for communication to the applicant. We want to ensure that development engineering has an understanding of its role and has the authority to exercise its role with respect to being the gatekeeper, as it were, being the principal point of contact, if not the sole point of contact, for applications coming into engineering for referral and for determining whether those applications meet the needs and standards of the city, and then where necessary, reaching out to other engineers and other divisions to provide feedback to the planning manager, the file manager. We often find in development engineering in some municipalities, we find that development engineering isn't the role of development engineering, the authority of development engineering aren't recognized or enhanced sufficiently to allow development engineering to deal with the majority of applications on its own without involving engineers from other parts of the organization. There will always be cases in complex files where we have particularly tricky infrastructure being proposed, where development engineering technicians or technologists will need to reach out to their counterparts, their colleagues in transportation and utilities and so forth. In most cases, however, we should be able to rely on our development engineering technologists to address the needs in their section of the organization and then return them to the applicant. Late hits, we always want to avoid late hits. We want to ensure that the works and services requirements that we identify are identified once and that we don't have to come back later in the process when it's expensive and difficult to address and when we introduce uncertainty. We want to ensure that we preclude or we prevent as many late hits, if not all of the late hits, as possible. As I think the group here will understand, right now in Abbotsford, we have a bit of a unique situation in that we have two types of agreements on works and service. We have a development agreement early in the process and we have a servicing agreement later in the process. Our recommendation is to replace those with simply a servicing agreement, which will be done earlier in the process as a condition of rezoning, similar to most other jurisdictions, or many other jurisdictions at least. That would allow for all the work to be done up front, would allow for, it'd add a little bit of time in the front end, reduce time at the back end with building permit and so forth. But it would allow also for us to distinguish between those applications that are serious about developing and that are going to come to fruition and versus those that are going to get rezoning and sit on them for a little bit. So we really advocate replacing the two-tier development and servicing agreements with simply a servicing agreement. And then finally, application quality. This relates a little bit back to the templates of professional reliance. We want to ensure that we are providing the tools and the guidance to consulting professionals who are acting on behalf of applicants to submit applications and the reports to support applications in a way that is that meets the standards, that can be reviewed easily, and that can add to rather than take away from the efficiency of the processes. And Mr. Chair, just with respect to recommendations, so referring back to the points just noted. So with development inquiry meetings, what we've recommended here is that we include a requirement for pre-application meetings for applications development inquiry meetings would be done for inquiries as opposed to applications, but have a pre-application meeting requirement so that applicants or prospective applicants come to the city. They're serious about developing to the city. They come to the city, they register for, they sign up for an application meeting. To that application meeting, we ensure that the staff who need to be there are there. Materials are provided in advance so that staff have a chance to review those in advance and provide useful feedback. And follow-up is provided after the meeting, both in verbally and in writing. This is something that we see in many municipalities now. We see also the charge that would be credited then to the application fee, provided such applications were submitted within a period of time. We've suggested 6 months. So what we would be looking at then is a replacement of our current system of free optional development inquiry meetings for all types of development to a requirement for pre-application meetings, particularly for certain types of developments that would allow the city to provide some focused attention to that, provide some very useful guidance to that, and keep certain types of inquiries out of the system because they do take quite a bit of time to address. Over the last 5 years, by the way, on average, we're looking at about 400 development inquiry meetings a year, and they all last about an hour on average. And so that takes a lot of staff time, and we think there's a better way to use that staff time. File management. We want to work towards a target of ensuring that complete applications, once they're submitted, are set up and assigned to a file manager within 2 weeks. So that streamlines things a little bit. It ensures that it attempts to address some of the sticking points that we noticed in our review. Application tracking, we want to enhance transparency and accountability. We want to reduce the time responding to inquiries. A lot of inquiries come into city staff to understand or find out where applications are in the system. And we want to do that by ensuring that we have data, we have an ability to track for applicants to track where things are in the system as well, and to find out that information on their own. With respect to target timelines, we've suggested that the city create and publish and report annually on the progress towards different timeline targets for different types of developments in the process. I talked about our development application review team. We want to transition that as a tool or as a forum that's used for the review of all development applications to one that focuses really on the more complex applications that have many different departments need to weigh in with many different types of requirements. And then to use that forum and use that discussion as a way to resolve any interdepartmental differences on the application, so that when we go back to the applicant, it's very clear that it is from one team that is reporting back. On streaming applications, we've suggested here the city create different application streams, one for simple applications, one for projects that are identified and endorsed by council as being priority, at least for council, but there could be other streams as well. When we look around, and folks here will understand, looking at different cities, we see some cities that have looked at different streams for non-market housing, for example, or for rental housing. So the actual focus of the stream is something for the city and for council to wrestle with and to choose. We've suggested that rather than having a first in, first out, we have a series of streams and we resource those streams so that we can move things along in parallel. Review letters and the city update review letter templates to include a checklist of required actions. So it's very clear to the recipient on what is required and when, to standardize communications with applicants and to ensure that the applicants receive a single complete review package that includes works and services requirements. So once and done with the review letters. We note as well that if we take that approach with review letters, we can anticipate it's going to take some time to provide that single review letter. And so we've suggested that let's give our file managers, where appropriate, the ability to reach out in advance and advise their applicants that there are going to be certain things in the review letter. If they wish, they can start to address some of those things earlier rather than wait for the whole letter. That's going to be something that's going to need to be managed carefully so we don't expose the city to risk and we don't get people doing things that they don't end up having to do. But there are ways that we can start to expedite that a little bit and have things started before the formal review letters submitted. Delegation of authority, we've said in essence that the city maximize its development approval authority. And templates and professional reliance that the city provide templates and guides to encourage consistency and quality in technical reports. And that the city formalize a policy for peer review of professional reports. We don't anticipate that peer review would be used in liberally or would be used regularly, but it is something that we think the city would benefit from having a formal policy on. So professionals who are submitting reports to the city understand the criteria the city would apply in reviewing those reports and possibly in seeking peer review. And then finally, Mr. Chair, we'll just go through very quickly the recommendations with respect to development engineering. The first is with role and authority. I noted earlier in the comments that we want to strengthen the role of Abbotsford's development engineering section. We want them to lead and not just coordinate the works and services review of the applications. That's a way really to limit what goes to other parts of engineering where appropriate. And on that note, we've looked to other cities that have created development review process protocols agreements. City of Kelowna is one. There's some other cities that have done that to really clarify the role of development engineering vis-a-vis that of other sections of engineering, and to identify exactly when and under what circumstances different applications would be referred to other professionals in different parts of the engineering sections or different parts of the engineering and regional utilities department. And by implication, then those that aren't referred to other parts of the department then would be dealt with specifically by and solely by development engineering. The late hits policy, we look at a late hits policy. There are a number of municipalities in BC that have adopted a formal policy on late hits, and we look to those and try to emulate that approach so that we strengthen the certainty that developers and applicants have with respect to requirements. And then I've noted already the development of servicing agreements that the city consider replacing its use of separate agreements with an approach that requires a servicing agreement and rezoning. And that covers, Mr. Chair, the questions, and I think I got it in half an hour. There we
You
go.
did.
A lot of material.
Thank you, Alan. All right, what's your pleasure? The floor is open. Questions?
Perfect. Okay, great.
Just on the pre-app meetings, at what stage of the process do you see that taking place? Like right before the application to confirm the completedness of the application before it gets taken in, or somewhere mid-process, like after we've done a little bit of design work, so we can get some pretty detailed feedback more than we would get at the DIM.
We would be looking at it early in the process, right at the outset, and what's happening in some other cities as well. So when there's a concept of an application or development being proposed, get some materials together. Not a lot of materials, not an onerous amount of materials, no big studies or anything, but just get together what we can. Fill out or submit your application for a pre-app meeting, and so that we then can, the city then can kind of gather around the table representatives of the departments that need to be there, review, discuss with the applicant what needs the concept. Is this going to fit? Is this not going to fit? What kinds of things are you going to want to consider based on policies in place, based on servicing in the area, those kinds of things. So have it early in the process. The purpose really being, well, a couple of purposes. One is frankly to weed out applications that aren't serious. The other one is to really give some guidance as much as possible, as early in the process as possible, to applicants on how to, while they're putting together their application, how to fashion it in a way that is going to be received in the most positive way possible, in the sense that it's going to have what it needs to move through the system quickly. It's going to have taken into account some of the contextual bits in that particular area of the city, all of those kinds of things.
So the DART review would happen after the pre-application?
Yes, it would.
Not
The DART review would happen once the application is already submitted.
Right.
Yes.
Ted, I see your hand up. We're not hearing you, Ted. Are you?
He's muted.
Am I good now?
Yeah, now we hear you.
Questions one, regarding applications Communication with the
Ted,
city.
The communication is fragmented. We're not getting a clear message signal.
If he turns off his videos, bandwidth should be better.
Suggestion is turn off your video. May improve your bandwidth, whatever that means.
Leo? All right, we'll try that. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. In terms of the applicant's communication with the city, given that some of these files can be quite complex and deal with a variety of issues, will there be one point of contact with the city so that there's no risk of kind of missing communications and things getting lost in this process?
Yeah, thank you through the chair to Ted. Thank you for the question. Yes, I noted in the comments earlier, the authority of the file manager role. That's one thing that we really want to emphasize so that we have one point of contact between the applicant and the city. The file manager's responsibility is to ensure that all of the relevant information that comes from different departments and different positions of the city is brought to bear on the application so that he or she can then communicate and be that sole point of contact and communication with the applicant. The only exception to that really should be when we have development engineering needing to weigh in from a works and services perspective. They would involve the file manager, but there may be some collective communication, if you will, with the applicant, but always with the file manager there.
Okay, thank you. Second question. Again, given the complexity and number of decisions that have to be made along the way, what kind of quality control system do you have in place? Kind of checks different milestones to make sure that this isn't going off the rails and you haven't under-promised or over-promised or mispromised.
Yes. Thank you for the question. And I'm going to ask my colleague Sherry also to comment on this, but I think I can maybe start off by saying that when we look at the Transparency Act, when we look at tracking our application through the system, we want to understand where it is in the system, but also what has yet to be submitted, what is still required, what is with the city and needs to be reviewed. So we need to make sure that we have through that process touch points on a regular basis. And it's up to the file manager again to ensure that he or she is tracking that clearly and where he or she needs to get input from planning manager, from the general manager, from whomever, from other departments, that is obtained so that nothing falls through the cracks. Sherry, is there anything that you can add to that?
Thanks. No, I think that was pretty good. I think we talked about having technology support that as well. So we are hoping to have the technology to be able to track that. And so applicants can also see when they've been hitting different milestones and really where the file is at. So not only will the file manager be aware, but the applicant can also, without bugging the file manager all the time, they will understand what's still needed, where they are in the process. So to make that a little more transparent, we're hoping to use the Amanda platform to be able to track that and to be able to provide that dashboard to applicants as well.
Thanks. Paul, your hand up.
So I'm not sure I'm following this process properly. Right now, if a homeowner wants to know, what can I do with my property? Come to City Hall.
Yes.
Talk to somebody at the counter. The answer is basically nothing, but you will set up a dim meeting and you can find out from if there's another answer.
Yep.
This process is saying at that point, $1,100 on the table, and then you can talk to somebody that's going to give you an answer that's probably different from what you get at the counter. Am I seeing that right?
Thank you for the question, first of all, and through the chair. One of the pitfalls of trying to move things through so quickly to get things done in half an hour is skipping over a few of the more nuanced bits. So that's not quite right, but
Good.
that is, but you're not at fault in that. I presented it in that way. So let me just back up a little bit and get a little more detail on that one. When we think of, when we have individuals, property owners, their agents, whomever coming or thinking about developing in
even understanding what the opportunities are for a particular piece of property in Abbotsford. What we're suggesting right now, it's come to the city, have a development information meeting, and give those to anybody. Staff take time out, they meet, 1 or 2 staff members, maybe more, spends an hour, off they go. Sometimes it pans out into an application, often it doesn't. That's just a feature of the system. What we're suggesting is more of a 3-tier approach. We first of all have through our existing but also enhanced materials, some online, some in writing, on kind of what the application process is, what that wouldn't address a specific property, but it would at least address some of the more generic questions, application process requirements, those kinds of things, timelines to expect, all of that. We then have development inquiry meetings still. So we have those where I'm not sure, but I don't have a concept yet. I want to kind of understand what I can do with this particular piece of property. Have a development inquiry meeting, pay $50 or $100 as a minor barrier, simply to kind of keep the system from being overloaded. Meet with staff, get the answers to those questions. Where there's a concept for a development, you have a more sophisticated developer perhaps, or you have a property owner that has spent some more time thinking about this. They understand what they want to do with their site. They've got a concept of development. Then it's let's have a pre-application meeting where we can come with our concept with some basic information on the site, on the zone, all those kinds of things. Come and meet with staff to say, how do I make this work? What's the best way to approach putting together an application? So that 3-tier system. So we recognize you've always got to have the ability for anybody to come forward and ask basic questions about potential for a property, seek information about processes. Where we get to more the prospect of an application and a concept of a development, that's where we look to the pre-application.
Who's giving the feedback, the advice on that initial meeting, that $100 meeting that you mentioned?
We've still got staff there, so we send at least 1 staff member from planning or development engineering. Like
So it's not just counter staff that
no, we
we
could
can have the background.
counter staff may be able to say, here's some materials to go away and have a
Right.
look at. If you want to learn a little bit more, let's schedule you for a development information meeting or inquiry meeting. If you got a concept already, let's go this route over the pre-app.
I had a couple things. First is the delegation to development engineering, which I think I'm a big fan of it, but it's my understanding that they don't have to go to operations now. So when we call and say, hey, what's going on? They say, well, it's with traffic. Now the authority is going to be delegated to that team that they can make choices on. Actually, I don't even know what it does, but line markings and stuff. So that the time it takes them to go to operations and that is eliminated.
Thank you for the question. Yes, and through the chair. In a general, oh, did you want to comment first, Nathan? Okay. In a general sense, yes. And really the initiative we're looking at here is to say, let's do 2 things. 1, let's save time in the overall process. But 2, and perhaps even more importantly, let's recognize that we have a team in place here whose really sole job is to ensure that applications have been assessed from an impact on services and works perspective, that the needs or the requirements related to services and works have been identified and communicated back to the applicant, and that once those services and works are in the ground and being constructed, that they meet the needs of the city that's going to inherit those works. So we want to put the emphasis there and prevent, in as many cases as possible, having to send applications from development engineering to transportation, to utilities, to others. There will always be cases where we need to send that. And that has to be the prerogative of the development engineering head to say, this is a tricky case, this is particularly complex. I'm not sure about this one. I need to involve and consult my colleagues in these other areas. But that should be 20% of the case. 80% of the time, we want to focus things here, deal with them here, and return them. Is that good?
Yeah, I mean, we have a development bylaw that indicates what is required for works and services, which are less than 80%. The development technologists are well versed on that bylaw, so they're able to assess whether what's being presented aligns with the bylaw and make that call, make that recommendation. That doesn't need to be referred to other engineers to then assess against the bylaw. 20% are for the nuances, the things that may not be covered in the bylaw because they're site specific.
And then I had another one on the late hits. Not a fan of late hits, they're like, obviously, but I'm also, like, in my experience, the more you punish staff for errors,
Yes.
the greater the timeline gets. So I'm afraid that if you start all of a sudden saying, hey, if you guys make an error, they have to go to their boss and say, hey, I just cost the city $100,000 or something. So I'm actually somewhat fearful of the late hit policy just because I prefer fast than perfect. And I think if we start punishing them, we're gonna be going for perfect and can't get perfect fast. So
Yeah, through the chair, that's a really good point, that kind of unintended consequence of having this. So yeah, I take that at value. That's a very good point. Thank you for that.
And that would be my fear with that first meeting as well, where I've been selling in this community for 30 years. The first answer is almost always no.
Okay.
And then how do we get to a maybe and then potentially to a yes? Well, that's more meetings with more and more people in the room. So when you're saying empower people to make decisions, it sounds great. It's been rare that that's been successfully implemented, at least from my experience in here.
That's a fair point. I think though, we can look to other places and we can see where it's working a little bit differently. And that's a function of a whole bunch of different things, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get to the point where it's going to take some experience and some trip ups before we get to the point where people feel empowered to make those decisions and are capable of making those. Perhaps in some cases, we've already got that in many of our staff, but not perhaps all of them. And so we want to build that capacity. It's not going to be a flick of a switch. It's not going to be overnight, but it's going to be something to work towards for sure.
Yes, Ken.
With regards to the development agreement and service agreement, kind of amalgamating those two, that sounds like a good idea for efficiency. I'm just wondering what that does for the applicant when they go to rezone it. I understand at the point of rezoning, they enter into a development agreement and service agreement. Is there any cost increases that they would incur in doing that versus the old way?
Sure. So, and I'm going to get Sherry to comment on this as well, but right now we've got the two that need to be done. The servicing doesn't happen until after rezoning. So right now the development agreement is incurred. The cost for that's incurred. Replacing that with and bringing forward the servicing agreement is going to take more time. There'll be more cost up front. It'll save time later in the process, but it will also ensure that developments that are brought forward into the system that are serious developments that are going to be proceeded with beyond rezoning as opposed to holding development. So that's a lot. And we're also kind of looking when we look around at a scan of other municipalities that we see it's increasingly rare to have that division of those two types of agreements. So we wanted to take advantage of that industry practice as well and bring that forward. Sherry, do you want to comment on that, or on the development versus the servicing agreements?
Sure, I think you captured most of it. It isn't, it is rather unusual to have both, and there are some developers that liked having them separate because they can, as Alan pointed out, maybe they can save a little bit of their upfront costs by delaying the servicing agreement. But overall, if you're planning to move forward, it saves you time and money, but it does involve a little bit of upfront costs at the rezoning stage instead. So there definitely were some developers that liked it that way, but because it is more common practice in the Lower Mainland to just have the one agreement, I think it makes sense to have that. And there were people, we spoke to developers who also commented on, when they did have the two-stage process, the servicing agreement and the development agreement, they would find that if there was a time lag, then when they went back to it, they had to change the development agreement because it was registered on title. And so there were to it as well. So, there's some advantages and disadvantages, but I think the advantages seem to outweigh the disadvantages of it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
I guess the question that comes to me is to you and your colleagues, for this concept to work, you guys are gonna have to be okay with the people are in the perimeter room breaking a couple of things along the way. Because otherwise it's just gonna shut down and create far more resistance.
Well, I don't know about my colleagues.
But
Colleagues.
that, when I'm weighing out this whole process, for it to succeed, council needs to empower these people to make decisions.
And I think, and hey, from my experience in the last number of terms, that we've been moved that way, increasingly that way, in empowering our staff. But I see it from our seniors, our city manager too, how he empowers his managerial staff below him. So I think I see the lateral leadership expanding from council to our city manager to his senior managers. But yeah, I don't see any problems there, personally. Okay,
And we
Mark, any last words?
Yeah, just a few, if I may. Can you put the slides back up? Thank you. Just for the committee, first of all, thank you for your comments and conversation. We'll take that into account as we advance this work. The next steps for us is, well, we were at the Business Innovation and Public Affairs Committee this morning. You folks this afternoon. We will be at the UDI Liaison Committee meeting next week. And staff is going to start working on an implementation plan based on Alan's findings. So that'll take into account what can we do that's rather quick and easy to do that has a good return on investment, so to speak, and what are some other ones that maybe have a little more cost and resource and time associated with them. So we will be putting forward an implementation plan and ultimately bring that plan to council for endorsement, as well as Alan's work here. That'll go to council as well for their consideration, and that'll happen over the next couple of months. So today, though, we are looking for some direction from the committee. That's staff's recommendation on the screen.
So to endorse this as generally described in this report.
Correct.
Anyone care to move this recommendation? Ryan, seconded by Ken. Any further questions, discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And Alan, thank you again for your input. Thank you. All right. We'll move on to energy and climate action, and I think Nathan's going to introduce us, right, or not? Or are you on your way out?
I'm on my way out.
Okay, I saw you leaving here. I'm just calling Erin then. She doesn't need introduction. Erin, all right.
I can either be for positive or negative reasons, I suppose.
That's a positive.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you to the committee for having me here today. I'm going to be speaking about our 2025 program initiatives for energy and climate action. My name is Erin Desotel. I'm the Senior Energy and Climate Action Manager. All right, so starting just with some brief context, I think for those of you that were here last year is very similar, but just why do we do this work at the local government level? So we're guided at an international level by the Paris Agreement, and this is informed through recommendations from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC. The IPCC is the nonpartisan United Nations body for assessing global science related to climate change. And then we move to nationally at that level through the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, and provincially through the Clean BC Plan, which is both adaptation and mitigation climate action, and also through our commitment to the BC Climate Action Charter, and at the local government level through the official community plan. So a little more on the OCP. This provides the foundation to support compact, complete, and low carbon communities, and also includes our greenhouse gas or carbon reduction targets. And in working towards these targets, the city has developed plans and strategies to reduce our carbon pollution and support climate resilience throughout Abbotsford. Corporately speaking, the 2022 Green Buildings Framework and the 2019 Green Fleet Strategy guide reductions for civic buildings and fleet and model climate action to the community. Implementation of these and other plans and strategies is ongoing, and it guides much of the initiatives the Energy and Climate Action team are advancing. So moving on to Council's strategic plan, which reinforces the city's commitment to sustainability and climate action. And this is particularly highlighted through Principle 2, Sustainable and Safe City. That said, goals and priority actions throughout the strategic plan provide many other links and opportunities to reduce carbon pollution, enhance resilience, and improve energy efficiency. So I've organized the bulk of today's presentation into 6 areas to highlight some of the themes energy and climate action is advancing. And there is a new one this year for those of you who were here last year. But these include resilience and adaptation, high performance buildings, zero emissions mobility, which is the addition, strengthening plans and policies, collaboration and partnerships, and celebrating progress. So starting with the theme of resilience and adaptation, the climate resilience strategy is a strategic priority action under the Sustainable and Safe Cities principle. This high-level strategy intends to support the city's role in responding to the increasing climate impacts felt throughout the community. And these include longer and more intense wildfire seasons, extreme heat events and droughts, and atmospheric rivers. The implications of the new Emergency and Disaster Management Act, or EDMA, that came into effect in late 2023 will also be considered so that the climate resilience strategy will dovetail with future emergency management planning for the city as new regulations are released by the province. The project will also include an update to Abbotsford's community energy and emissions inventory, and this tracks our progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions to meet our targets set out in the OCP. Strong staff guidance will support the project through the process, and we'll be using a low carbon resilience lens to allow the city to look for opportunities to integrate both carbon pollution reduction with preparing for the impacts of climate change. Some key approaches staff are proposing include acknowledging and celebrating work completed and currently underway under that broader banner of climate resilience. The project will also leverage this progress to build on what's been accomplished. And this is clear through city plans and strategies such as the Abbotsford Extreme Weather Response Plan, Know Your Hazards Guide, and long-term flood mitigation strategy. The project timeline includes 4 stages with initial background research and key findings currently underway. And once this is completed, a consultant will be engaged to help us explore options, and tasks will include internal and external engagement and a climate risk assessment to identify hazards, and then ultimately outline a strategic approach to supporting community resilience. A draft strategy will be developed, and staff will bring this to council to confirm it aligns with the city's interests, priorities before it's finalized by the end of 2025. So moving into the theme of high performance buildings and starting with the civic facility, staff continue to advance the ARC Heat Recovery and Optimization, or HERO project. Through the HERO project, the mechanical systems of the 3 areas of the Aquatic Center, Ice Rink, and Community Rec Center will be integrated to make use of a heat recovery and sharing system. And this will reduce carbon pollution of the facility by over 70% and decrease annual energy use by 40%. The project also improves accessibility of the pool area. And this $10 million project is supported by a federal Green and Inclusive Community Buildings grant. And that's for just under half of the total project cost. There's a diverse project team involved, and that includes the project management office, operations, energy and climate action staff, and consultants. And if you visited ARC in the last few months, you've likely noted this project is currently in the construction phase and is on schedule to be completed by the end of the year. And you may have also seen some of the public materials that are letting people know not only that there's work happening, why there's a disruption, and why it's a priority for the city. Strategic energy management of our corporate assets continues to take place citywide, and this is typically through energy studies, lighting upgrades, and low carbon technology assessment. And these all provide opportunities to embed energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reductions into corporate projects. So some projects like the sports field lighting study have been recently completed, while others like the water pump infrastructure study are just getting underway. And staff are always looking for external funding sources to support this work. The water pump study is a good example. BC Hydro is funding 100% of the study cost, and there are opportunities to leverage additional implementations, incentives, and we'll explore those as part of next steps. 2025 also brings opportunities to efficiently assess a number of corporate facilities through a bundled approach. We have 2 of these scheduled for this year, and these will study 11 buildings in total. And staff have strategically targeted buildings in the city's portfolio that have higher GHG emissions. And these will maximize potential impact through both short and long-term recommendations. These will be aimed at decarbonizing, improving energy efficiency, and lowering operating costs. And I'll just note here that energy and climate action staff work closely with operations and facilities staff on studies and projects like these to make sure we're identifying and prioritizing those that are aligned with capital plans. In the community realm, and still talking about high performance buildings, the city continues to collaborate with partners on education and training for the buildings and development sector. And hopefully some of you have been able to take advantage of those or have heard of them. Leveraging the success of training sessions the city's offered since 2021, staff were involved in delivering a 3-part series of workshops focused on familiarizing the development community with the zero carbon step code and equipping them with knowledge to operationalize these upcoming building code requirements. These workshops were offered in person in Abbotsford, and partners included BC Hydro, BCIT, Canadian Home Builders Association of the Fraser Valley, Community Futures South Fraser, and the cities of Chilliwack and Mission. I'm happy to share that registration was full for every workshop plus a waiting list. And I also wanted to mention that the Canadian Home Builders Association of the Fraser Valley graciously awarded us the Industry Partner of the Year award for the work that we've done up to date, and they continue to be a great partner. A final initiative under high performance buildings is the city's work on its first residential retrofit program. This program intends to support residents in reducing their carbon footprint through home decarbonization and energy efficiency improvements. Program design was completed last year and defined the program's 3 overarching goals that you can see. And we had great help from Archway Community Services. And with this help, the project team centered equity and engaged community members to better understand their barriers and challenges when it comes to climate-friendly retrofits. So now, with a solid understanding of program delivery methods, staff will assess possible approaches to maximize program impact before providing pilot program options to council for approval. So moving on to the new category of zero emissions mobility, the city is leading the development of a regional zero emissions mobility strategy. And this intends to set achievable goals and provide a high-level roadmap for supporting zero emissions mobility throughout the Fraser Valley region. A collaborative project team includes the City of Abbotsford, City of Chilliwack, and Fraser Valley Regional District. And these 3 local governments are providing project funding to match a grant secured through BC Hydro. This strategy intends to support the work the city is doing to encourage a mode shift towards greater reliance on active transportation options, and also provide policy direction to meet greenhouse gas reduction targets that are shared at various levels of government. Direction from the strategy is expected to primarily target the encouragement of light-duty zero emissions vehicles, so like cars, SUVs, and small pickup trucks, while also considering zero emissions or micromobility technologies like e-bikes and e-scooters. The strategy will also explore medium and heavy-duty vehicle transitions over the longer term, but knowing that's a more difficult sector to address. I wanted to also highlight 2 initiatives that are complementary to the zero emissions mobility strategy. And these initiatives also recognize the greater number of zero emissions vehicles that will be on the road in Abbotsford through the implementation of the BC Zero Emissions Vehicle Act. With a provincial sales target of 100% zero emissions vehicles by 2035, we're looking to ensure the city has infrastructure and capacity to support this transition and allow Abbotsford residents, businesses, and visitors to efficiently get around the community. So first, staff are looking at opportunities for the city to partner with third-party electric vehicle charging infrastructure operators that would provide charging at key locations throughout the city. Some consideration in assessing these providers includes reliability, accessibility, customer service, and costs to drivers. Having sufficient electrical capacity at these sites is also an essential factor. So as an example, you may have seen a new EV charging station at the ICBC that's just located at the corner of George Ferguson and Trethewey. So that's an example of where a third-party provider, which was BC Hydro in this case, has installed those chargers at ICBC, and they've put in 8 DC or fast chargers and 5 level 2 ports. So really close to us here. So secondly, staff are working on non-residential EV-ready requirements, and these would complement those developed by the city for residential developments in 2022. Non-residential includes industrial and commercial land uses, and these requirements make it more cost-effective to install EV charging infrastructure when it's needed down the road, without having the capacity and energy system integrated when newly built. Retrofitting to install EV chargers is significantly more expensive. So the next category is strengthening plans and policies. And there's 4 initiatives here I'll briefly go over. Starting with the OCP update, climate change has been identified as a key challenge impacting residents and future growth of the city. And energy and climate action staff are part of the technical advisory group for this project. As I mentioned earlier, the OCP establishes the GHG reduction targets, and this update provides an opportunity to consider these targets and explore coordination with those of provincial and federal governments. This project is currently in stage 3 of drafting policy. So next, staff are involved in a BC Hydro funded project examining challenges and opportunities to improve the provincial energy and emissions data set used to develop our greenhouse gas inventory. So this is a much less glamorous project, but having reliable and high quality data is important to understand our community's climate action progress. Next, energy and climate action staff are also part of the asset management steering committee and involved in discussions around how asset management decision-making considers climate change on the city's substantial inventory of both built and natural assets. And the last initiative is updating 2 policies, the energy policy and the climate action reserve fund policy. This update addresses new requirements to advance climate action found in the local government climate action program, or LGCAP. And this program provides annual funding to support the city's climate action efforts. The energy policy updates are meant to reflect energy management best practices to better support city decision-making. And both policies will be brought to council for approval. So moving on to collaboration and partnerships. This is an area where the city does quite well, I think, and there's definitely some folks around this table who are found on this list, and some hopefully that will be in the future. So first off, we have utilities. Partnerships with BC Hydro and Fortis are long-standing, and both utilities actively fund city projects and provide access to peer networks, resources, and other training opportunities. We also have co-funding agreements in place with both to support city staff positions. Secondly, we partner with other local governments, and I've mentioned a few initiatives, including the education and outreach for STEP Code and the Zero Emissions Mobility Strategy. This helps to broaden the reach of these and make sure we're aligned with other cities adjacent to us and regional government. The last but not least, our collaboration in the community includes those organizations connected to the building industry, green economy, and enhancing project outcomes through engagement. And we also keep in touch with UFE staff and faculty through City Studio and Hubbub, for any of you that might have been here yesterday for that event, as well as the corporate sustainability and energy team. And I'm happy to say that we'll also be hiring a new co-op student for the first time this year to increase our capacity. And I mentioned this topic under this category as the intention is for this role to support more engagement in the initiatives that have that outreach to community. So the last category is celebrating progress. And the Energy and Climate Action team does this in a few different ways. I'll just highlight a few here. Our utility partnerships I spoke to include regular update meetings and presentations to share efforts staff had made and achievements realized. So these are also opportunities to not only share how we're doing things really well, but also to share pain points that might be challenging our progress and get some good feedback to identify breakthroughs and ways to get unstuck. And since 2017, the city has produced an annual sustainability report. And this lists climate action and sustainability initiatives and the work advanced across a number of areas and departments, much of which is reported to the province. Staff will be bringing a report to council in the fall with our annual update of energy and climate action work. This will also coincide with the release of the 2024 Local Government Climate Action Program Survey and Annual Sustainability Report. Just ending with some financial considerations and bringing your attention to the Climate Action Reserve Fund, or CARF. The initiatives described previously are funded by annual operating budgets as well as through the CARF, which is intended to support the implementation of carbon neutral projects. I previously mentioned the CARF policy that's being updated and guides the use of this fund. And you can see on the screen, there is a healthy balance in the CARF at the moment, though the majority of these funds are already dedicated to projects in both the planning and implementation stages. And with that, I'll just leave you with some questions and welcome any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. What's happening? So, questions? Anyone, comments? Online? Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, just a connection with BC Transit and how are we doing with improved transit?
Through the chair, I think that would be potentially something I can talk to our transportation team in engineering. And yeah, that's something I would, they're not a current partner for us. I do know the staff that work on the energy and climate action side of it. So that's more where the networking comes from. Thanks.
Any questions from online that you know, ladies? No? Okay. Did they leave us?
They just turned their videos off,
Okay.
but Ted's still
Okay.
here and Tanis as well. They should have another video.
All right. Good. Right, then, if there's no more questions or any questions, you're all done. Thanks for your report. That brings us to the annual report. Compliments of Robin. Oh.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thanks very much. I'm Robin McLeod. I'm the Director of Building Permits and Licenses with the City of Abbotsford. So I think you've all had a chance, you received a copy of the annual report, so I'm here to highlight some of the highlights of the annual report. So the city received more development applications in 2024 than any other year since 2021. Applications picked up in the second half of the year following council's adoption of the SMU bylaws. The pickup has largely been in applications for infill, rezoning, subdivisions after the first half of the year when many applicants appeared to be waiting for council's decision on SMU permissions. So not included in the graph here are the other types of applications, which can include DP exemptions for natural environment, steep slopes, legal documents, things like that. Multifamily remains strong. 6-story wood frame apartments are the most common form of apartments, although we have received an application for a 30-story high-rise in city center. As you'll see in some of the upcoming slides, 2024 was a record-breaking year for residential approvals. As a result, for the first time in 3 years, the number of residential lots and units in stream has begun to roll over. In-stream multifamily units declined for the first time in several years, which is the result of the city having approved several large projects in 2024, including 130 townhouses in the U District, 190 townhouse units in Cooper Farms, 491 apartments across from High Street Mall, and 300 apartment units at the Red Robin site at the city center. So single family picked up slightly with some large subdivision applications submitted in West Abbotsford. There are also 45 duplex lots at Cooper Farms and 125 lots proposed as part of the next phase of Augustin. A few projects to mention here of in-stream residential applications. Berkwin Mill Lake area, 6-story apartment. There's lots of interest around Marshall and McCallum Horizon Street, and the Rail District Department project as well, Montrose. We saw a decline from 2023 ICI applications. However, we still are above the 5-year average. Industry remains the largest contributor to the amount of floor space. And of course, industrial is good for the local economy and jobs. Two notable projects here, the Huntingford properties, industrial development on Mount Lehman, totaling 85,000 square meters of floor space, and also a new Toyota dealership near High Street. Sorry, that was hunger. 2024 was the biggest year for residential approvals on record, more than doubling any of the previous 5 years. Over 75% of approved housing was in 2024 was apartment. 17% of that was townhouses. 92% of all housing approved in 2024 was multifamily. And two notable projects in this category, 419 apartment units across from High Street Mall and 130 townhouse units in the U District. Approved ICI applications, big decline from 2023, which was a particularly big year for industrial development. Planning doesn't approve many applications for institutional uses. They're not typically subject to a DP. However, there were two significant projects in 2024. One was MEI received a variance for both height and parking requirements. They also completed an ALC application for non-farm use. And Northview Community Church also received a height variance to accommodate a larger congregation space. Two projects of note, a new industrial building on Iron Mills Court in the Paradonville industrial area, and the mixed-use building of more than 800 square meters of ground floor commercial space in the Rail District. For issued building permits, 2024 continued a trend of fewer issued building permits over the previous year, with 2024 coming in slightly below the 5-year average. Looking at issued permits by type compared to 2023, we exceeded last year's totals for multifamily, industrial, and institutional. Commercial, industrial, and other categories, which are like signs and swimming pools, are generally in line with 2023. And agricultural and single-family permits were down modestly. So this is just a breakdown of the new residential units by type. New townhouse and apartment units exceeded the 5-year average. New single-family units were up relative to 2023. Breakdown of the ICI and agricultural floor area by type. Institutional floor area far exceeded any other year. This is primarily due to UFV's expansion with student housing. Commercial floor area was right about at the 5-year average, while industrial exceeded the 5-year average. Agricultural was down significantly in 2024. We saw a record-breaking year for total construction value, a significant increase of $340 million from 2023. Multifamily, industrial, and institutional being biggest contributors. Both multifamily and industrial saw less dwelling units and floor space approved than 2023, but higher construction costs. And the higher cost of construction is part of the story here, and also the complexity of the buildings being constructed. A few notable projects to mention: Vitalis Industrial Development on Mount Lehman, totaling $185 million. UFV's expansion, including the new student housing, 398 new beds, was $1.1 million.
Thanks, Robin. Good everybody tonight. Floor is open, anyone?
Oh.
You answered all the questions.
I think so.
Vote.
Oh, Ted.
Good old Ted.
Just one question on the last slide. Do you think you're going to reach your year 5 target?
We're gonna try. Of course, the targets are based on occupancy, so we have a lot that are approved in principle. We're just hoping they will actually get built, which is somewhat out of our control, right?
Right.
How is the digital online application process going? I know that was quite a big jump for the city
It
to
was,
take that on.
it was a very big jump. It's been about a year now, and we're still making tweaks. We're still making improvements. We're trying to get more of the permit applications to be online as well. We're in the testing period of plumbing and sprinkler permits now, so hopefully that'll be out by the end of the month. But yeah, I think after working with it for a year and also the digital plan review, we're still making tweaks and improvements, which is good.
Okay. I see no further takers on questions, comments, any new business anyone wish to throw on the table? All right, then, yeah, there was no recommendations on the annual report. So all we're looking for now is a recommendation for adjournment. Rob, say again. I presume they're all in favor, so we'll adjourn. Thanks for coming. I guess wildly overestimated how much time we're going to spend. Wait, boy, did we just